Picture this: the transitional parliament of Burkina Faso, packed with men in suits and uniforms, the kind of room where you'd expect endless debates, amendments, and maybe one lone rebel saying, "Wait, guys, maybe this isn't a good idea." Except, nope, not this time. In July 2025, Burkina Faso's lawmakers didn't just flirt with controversy, they speed ran into it. With a unanimous vote, yes, unanimous, like a choir hitting the same notes, they passed a new family code that criminalizes homosexuality. No hesitation, no dissent, just a swift political sledgehammer. Same-sex relationships are now a crime. And not just a symbolic crime with fines so small you could pay them off with pocket change. Nope, this law packs real teeth. Up to 5 years in prison, fines reaching nearly $8,000, and for non-citizens caught in same-sex relationships, deportation with a nice legal bow on top. It's like the lawmakers sat down and asked, how can we make this as harsh as possible, but still look like we're defending tradition? And then they nailed it. Burkina Faso has long been painted as one of West Africa's moderate voices. Sure, socially conservative, but not as extreme as Uganda or Nigeria when it came to LGBT laws. People assumed the country would stay quietly in the middle lane. But with this law, that middle lane just got bulldozed. Burkina Faso shifted from live and let live into live the way we say, or don't live here at all. And here's where it gets juicier. The law was passed by a transitional government, meaning a military-backed regime that came to power after a coup. So in a way, this wasn't just about homosexuality, it was about legitimacy. Military juntas can't brag about democracy or stable economies, but they can brag about being the defenders of morality. And nothing wins clout in conservative African politics faster than a loud anti-LGBT stance. Activists, both local and international, were stunned. Not because they didn't see it coming, the region has been sliding in this direction, but because of the speed and severity. Imagine you're an LGBT person in Ouagadougou, living quietly, trying not to make waves. Overnight, your life becomes a legal minefield. That friend you hang out with too often? Suspicious. That text message on your phone? Evidence. That safe space cafe you used to visit? Now a potential police target. The personal cost is huge. Suddenly, you're not just marginalized, you're criminalized. And symbolism matters. When an entire parliament votes unanimously for criminalization, it sends a loud message. We're united in this. Don't even think of challenging us. That unanimity is scarier than the law itself, because it means there's no room for public political debate, no alternative voices, no opposition saying, hold on, maybe this is too far. Instead, the political class in Burkina Faso chose to flex unity over diversity, and LGBT lives became the scapegoat. But here's the thing. This law isn't really about LGBT Burkinabés at all. Nope, they're just the pawns on the chessboard. The real game? Power, politics, and clout. And that takes us to fact 2. Here's the dirty little secret about politics. Laws aren't always written for the people they claim to affect. More often than not, they're written for the audience, the voters, the donors, the allies. It's theater, with a script crafted for applause. And that's exactly what's happening in Burkina Faso. On paper, the new anti-homosexuality law is about protecting the family and preserving culture. Sounds noble, right? But scratch that glossy cover and you'll find the real motive: clout. In West African politics right now, clout is the hottest currency in circulation. Forget oil, gold, or cocoa. Moral posturing pays faster dividends. Think about it. A transitional military government, fresh from a coup, can't boast about democracy or long-term stability. They can't promise investors a booming stock market. What can they do? Frame themselves as guardians of morality and tradition. And nothing screams defender of tradition louder than outlawing homosexuality. It's an easy win in a deeply conservative society. One bold law, and suddenly you're not just a junta, you're the saviors of national values. But here's the kicker. LGBT Burkinabés aren't people in this political game. They're props, convenient scapegoats, punching bags for a government desperate for validation. Imagine you're Robert Amafuru, the activist who called out this exploitation. He said it clearly. African LGBT lives are being used for clout. Their suffering is a stage prop for politicians to score applause lines. It's like when a bad comedian roasts the shy kid in class because he knows the audience will laugh. The kid walks away humiliated, but the comedian walks away with approval. That's how Burkinabe politicians are treating LGBT citizens, as joke material in the comedy of power. And here's the political genius, read cruelty, behind it. Anti-LGBT laws are the perfect distraction. Got economic instability? Blame Western immorality. Got inflation and unemployment? Shout about protecting tradition. Got insurgencies eating at your borders? Forget that. The real threat is your neighbor's sexuality. It's the oldest trick in the book. When people are angry, give them someone else to be angry at. A scapegoat, a moral enemy. And right now, LGBT Africans are playing that role, unwillingly, tragically, and dangerously. But don't think for a second this is just about local politics. No. Leaders know these laws resonate internationally too. To conservative allies, the law says, "We're with you in the culture war." To critics, it says, "Stay out of our business. This is sovereignty." Either way, the government wins points, at home and abroad. And those points, priceless for a junta hungry for legitimacy. And if you think Burkina Faso invented this playbook, think again. This isn't a solo act. Across the continent, politicians are running the same script, and it's spreading like wildfire. Welcome to the regional copy-paste. Politics in Africa has a funny way of traveling, not on airplanes, but on copy machines. One country makes a move, and before you know it, 3 others are pasting the same policy, like students cheating off each other in an exam hall. And that's exactly what's happening with anti-LGBT laws. Burkina Faso's big family code bomb isn't an isolated shocker. Nope. It's the latest domino in a regional chain reaction. Take Mali, for example. Just last year, they criminalized homosexuality under their military-backed transitional government. Sound familiar? That's because Burkina Faso practically Xeroxed Mali's strategy. Same junta vibes, same anti-LGBT law, same promise to defend traditional values. Then there's Uganda, which passed one of the harshest anti-LGBT laws on the planet in 2023, making even promotion of homosexuality a crime. Politicians there celebrated it as a win for African identity, while critics called it state-sponsored persecution. And Ghana? Their parliament's been flirting with its own version of an anti-LGBT crackdown, promising jail time for anyone even advocating LGBT rights. So what we're looking at isn't a single spark, it's a regional wildfire. Leaders see neighbors scoring political points with anti-LGBT laws, and they think, why not us? We could use some easy applause too. Here's how the copy-paste formula works. Step 1. Identify a vulnerable group. Step 2. Frame them as a Western import corrupting African culture. Step 3. Pass a tough law protecting tradition. Step 4. Sit back as crowds cheer and critics are silenced. It's politics on autopilot. Cheap, easy, and effective. Who needs economic reforms or security victories when you can just legislate morality and call it leadership? This strategy has 3 irresistible perks for African governments under pressure. It's low cost. Writing a law is easier than fixing an economy. It's popular. In conservative societies, the majority cheers, so leaders get instant credibility. It's distraction gold. Citizens worried about insurgencies or food shortages suddenly shift focus to moral threats. It's like waving a shiny toy in front of a crying child. Effective, even if it doesn't solve the real problem. But here's the dangerous part. This regional copy paste isn't just about politics. It creates a continent wide climate of hostility. When one country criminalizes homosexuality, it emboldens others. It normalizes discrimination. It signals to citizens, hey, if the government says this group is illegal, you can harass them too. That ripple effect doesn't stop at borders. It spreads like an algorithm, reinforcing hate one law at a time. But here's the irony. Many of these traditional values laws aren't traditional at all. They've got fingerprints from history all over them, colonial fingerprints. And that goes from the past is where we're headed next. Here's the irony that nobody in those protect our traditions speeches likes to admit. A lot of Africa's anti-LGBT laws aren't actually African at all. They're colonial hand-me-downs, relics from European powers who sailed in centuries ago, carved up the continent like a pizza, and decided which lifestyles were acceptable. Yep, the same leaders who thumped their chests about rejecting Western immorality are often enforcing Western laws from the 1800s. Let that sink in. Take Britain. When the empire stretched across Africa, it brought along Section 377 of its penal code, the infamous Unnatural Acts Law. This law criminalized same-sex intimacy, lumping it in with bestiality and calling it a crime against nature. Colonial officers enforced it brutally, and when they finally left, surprise, surprise, the laws stayed behind like unwanted furniture. Today, many Commonwealth countries still enforce versions of those dusty British codes. The language may have been tweaked, but the ghost of Queen Victoria's morality still haunts the statute books. And don't think France was any better. Under its so-called Mission Civilisée, the civilizing mission, French administrators exported their own moral codes to colonies like Burkina Faso. Family laws, criminal laws, religious restrictions, all designed to reshape African societies in Europe's image. Decades later, politicians stand at podiums declaring LGBT rights are un-African. Funny, isn't it? Because the laws they're quoting aren't African either. They're French leftovers, reheated and served as homegrown cuisine. So why keep them? Part of it is inertia. Laws are sticky, especially when they align with social conservatism. But part of it is politics. Leaders realized these colonial relics were gold mines for clout. Enforcing them wins points. Strengthening them wins even more. And suddenly, what began as European imports are rebranded as tradition. It's like inheriting your grandma's ugly curtains and then bragging about your unique sense of style. No, buddy, those curtains aren't you. They're leftovers. Here's the kicker. While African leaders defend these traditional laws, the very countries that wrote them have moved on. Britain decriminalized homosexuality decades ago. France legalized same-sex marriage in 2013. The old colonizers ditched the furniture. Africa's leaders are the ones still polishing it. That double standard doesn't just expose hypocrisy, it also fuels activists' arguments. Because when leaders claim LGBT rights are Western propaganda, activists can clap back with, actually, criminalization was the Western propaganda. Our pre-colonial cultures had more nuance than you're admitting. And that's the saddest part. Before colonization, many African societies had diverse views on sexuality and gender. Some celebrated fluidity, others tolerated it quietly, but it wasn't universally condemned. Colonization rewrote that script, imposing rigid norms in the name of civilization. So when activists today say these laws are colonial ghosts, they're not exaggerating. They're pointing out a historical hijacking of culture that continues to shape modern politics. And if colonialism planted the seed, religion became the fertilizer, because nothing supercharges a law like a pulpit, a sermon, and a crowd ready to shout amen. That's fact 5. If colonialism left the blueprint, religion came in with the paintbrush, bold, bright, and impossible to ignore. In Africa's modern anti-LGBT politics, the pulpit often echoes louder than the parliament. Laws get written in government halls, sure, but their fire is stoked in churches, mosques, and crusade tents under the stars. Let's start with Christianity. Over the past 40 years, Africa has become one of the fastest-growing centers of evangelical Christianity. American and European missionaries poured in, preaching fire and brimstone sermons that made LGBT issues front and center. And trust me, they didn't hold back. Think about it. Imported sermons railing against sinful lifestyles gave politicians a ready-made moral script. All they had to do was copy it into law. The message spread like gospel Wi-Fi, fast, cheap, and everywhere. Now, flip the coin. In Muslim-majority regions like northern Nigeria, Mali, and parts of Burkina Faso, Islamic conservatism adds another layer. Religious leaders frame anti-LGBT laws not as colonial imports, but as divine obligations. When politics and Sharia overlap, the narrative shifts from "this is tradition" to "this is God's command." And in societies where religion isn't just faith, but identity, that's powerful. Who wants to argue with God on the campaign trail? Spoiler: nobody. Here's where it gets interesting. Politicians and religious leaders often form an unholy alliance. Politicians push the laws, pastors and imams preach the justification, and together they present it as a moral shield against Western corruption. The result? A powerful cocktail of faith and politics that silences dissent. Anyone who questions the law isn't just opposing the government, they're opposing God. That's not just debate ending, that's career ending. Religious leaders also double down on the claim that LGBT identities are un-African. Sermons paint queerness as an imported disease infecting the continent from the West. The irony? The same leaders often wear European robes, carry Bibles translated by colonial missionaries, and quote laws written in colonial times. But facts don't matter when the pulpit is booming. The un-African myth is sticky, powerful, and emotionally charged. It frames the debate as a cultural defense rather than a political ploy. For ordinary LGBT Burkinabés, this religious firepower makes life twice as dangerous. The law criminalizes them, but the sermon demonizes them. Together, they create a climate where neighbors feel morally justified to harass, attack, or out them. It's persecution with the holy stamp of approval, and that's far more terrifying than the fine print of any legal code. But let's step out of the theory and into the streets, because while politicians and preachers debate morality, LGBT Burkinabés live the fallout every single day. And that's where fact 6 comes in. It's one thing to debate laws in a parliament hall where everyone's in crisp suits, sipping bottled water, and pretending to protect morality. It's another thing entirely to live under those laws in the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, where neighbors gossip, police prowl, and life suddenly feels like walking through a minefield. Because here's the reality. For LGBT Burkinabés, this isn't about abstract policy, it's about survival. Overnight, entire communities have to shrink into the shadows. Imagine being a young man caught texting a same-sex partner. Suddenly, that private conversation is potential evidence. Imagine two women living together as roommates. Neighbors now whisper, eyes linger, rumors swirl. Jobs, risky. Healthcare, complicated. Social life, practically outlawed. And the kicker? Once the law says you're a criminal, vigilantes feel empowered to play judge, jury, and executioner. One of the ugliest ripple effects, health. LGBT groups often run safe clinics, especially for HIV prevention. But under these laws, those clinics are targeted or shut down. Suddenly, vital medicine goes underground. People stop seeking treatment out of fear of exposure, and public health, for everyone, not just LGBT people, takes a hit. So while politicians brag about defending morality, hospitals quietly watch infection rates rise. It's not just cruel, it's suicidal policy. Then there's the police. These laws hand them a shiny new tool of control. In societies where corruption already runs high, this is a gold mine. Picture this. An officer sees two men walking together at night. Suspicion alone becomes an excuse for arrest, extortion, or humiliation. LGBT Burkina Faso aren't just worried about jail, they're worried about the unofficial fines demanded on the spot to avoid it. It's less about law enforcement and more about legalized harassment. And it's not just the state. Ordinary citizens now feel like enforcers. Landlords evict tenants, employers fire workers, families disown children, all while pointing to the law as moral justification. This isn't just exclusion, it's erasure, a deliberate pushing out of an entire community from public life. And here's the darkest part. When you're criminalized, you can't fight back openly. LGBT Burkina Faso can't organize rallies or petition parliament. Even raising your voice risks arrest. That silence is suffocating, and it's exactly what politicians want. A voiceless scapegoat, easy to demonize, powerless to resist. But here's where the story flips. Because while LGBT people are silenced, their identities aren't just targeted, they're weaponized. Politicians, preachers, and influencers aren't ignoring them, they're exploiting them for clout. And that's fact 7.
Here's the twisted irony. LGBT Burkina Faso aren't just being criminalized. They're being used. Their very existence has become political currency. And like any currency in politics, it's less about the people holding it and more about the elites cashing it in. Activist Robert Amafaru nailed it when he said LGBT Africans are being exploited for clout. Think about that for a second. The same leaders who make life unlivable for queer people are the ones racking up likes, cheers, and political points for defending tradition. It's persecution as performance art. Picture it like a theater production. On stage, politicians thumping podiums, pastors booming sermons, imams warning of corruption of morals. In the audience, citizens clapping, nodding, shouting amen. And in the middle, LGBT Burkina Faso, cast unwillingly as villains in a play they never auditioned for. Make LGBT people the scapegoat. Frame them as puppets of the West. Pass laws to protect the nation. Walk off stage to applause and legitimacy. The politicians get standing ovations, the LGBT community gets the blame. And don't underestimate the role of clout online. In today's Africa, politicians and influencers live for the viral soundbite. A fiery anti-LGBT speech that's guaranteed trending material. Clips circulate on TikTok, WhatsApp groups, and Facebook. The message? Look at me, the brave defender of tradition. The reality? Vulnerable people reduced to hashtags in a clout-chasing competition. It's not governance, it's marketing. And LGBT people are the unwilling ad campaign. Religious leaders, too, aren't missing their shot. A sermon condemning homosexuality isn't just about faith, it's a crowd pleaser. Congregations cheer, donations rise, reputations grow. The LGBT issue becomes a shortcut to spiritual authority. Think of it like fast food for influence. Cheap, easy, instantly satisfying, but ultimately unhealthy for society. And here's the tragedy. While elites gain clout, real LGBT lives are torn apart. People lose jobs, homes, families. Young queer Africans face violence or flee into exile, yet their pain is invisible. Or worse, it's the fuel that keeps the political machine running. Politicians don't see citizens, they see props. Religious leaders don't see souls, they see talking points. Exploitation isn't just collateral damage, it's the strategy. And if you think it ends there, think again. The exploitation isn't just social or political, it's financial. Because behind the sermons and speeches lies another motivator: money, aid, and international funding games. That's fact 8.
Here's the twisted irony. LGBT Burkinabés aren't just being criminalized, they're being used. Their very existence has become political currency. And like any currency in politics, it's less about the people holding it and more about the elites cashing it in. Activist Robert Amufuru nailed it when he said LGBT Africans are being exploited for clout. Think about that for a second. The same leaders who make life unlivable for queer people are the ones racking up likes, cheers, and political points for defending tradition. It's persecution as performance art. Picture it like a theater production. On stage, politicians thumping podiums, pastors booming sermons, imams warning of corruption of morals. In the audience, citizens clapping, nodding, shouting amen. And in the middle, LGBT Burkinabés cast unwillingly as villains in a play they never auditioned for. Make LGBT people the scapegoat. Frame them as puppets of the West. Pass laws to protect the nation. Walk off stage to applause and legitimacy. The politicians get standing ovations. The LGBT community gets the blame. And don't underestimate the role of clout online. In today's Africa, politicians and influencers live for the viral soundbite. A fiery anti-LGBT speech? That's guaranteed trending material. Clips circulate on TikTok, WhatsApp groups, and Facebook. The message? Look at me, the brave defender of tradition. The reality? Vulnerable people reduced to hashtags in a clout-chasing competition. It's not governance, it's marketing. And LGBT people are the unwilling ad campaign. Religious leaders, too, aren't missing their shot. A sermon condemning homosexuality isn't just about faith, it's a crowd pleaser. Congregations cheer, donations rise, reputations grow. The LGBT issue becomes a shortcut to spiritual authority. Think of it like fast food for influence. Cheap, easy, instantly satisfying, but ultimately unhealthy for society. And here's the tragedy. While elites gain clout, real LGBT lives are torn apart. People lose jobs, homes, families. Young queer Africans face violence or flee into exile. Yet their pain is invisible, or worse. It's the fuel that keeps the political machine running. Politicians don't see citizens, they see props. Religious leaders don't see souls, they see talking points. Exploitation isn't just collateral damage, it's the strategy. And if you think it ends there, think again. The exploitation isn't just social or political, it's financial. Because behind the sermons and speeches lies another motivator: money, aid, and international funding games. That's fact 8. Follow the money. Because at the end of the day, politics isn't just about clout or morality, it's about cash. And when it comes to anti-LGBT laws in Africa, the financial angle is where the story gets really messy. Let's start with the basics. LGBT organizations in Africa often depend on international aid. We're talking about NGOs funding HIV prevention clinics, safe spaces, hotlines, and community outreach. Without this support, many queer Africans would be left with literally nothing. But here's the catch. When governments criminalize LGBT existence, those aid pipelines dry up. donors pull out, projects collapse, and the very communities that need help the most are abandoned. It's like turning off the water supply in the middle of a drought. Everyone suffers, but the most vulnerable suffer first. That creates a cruel paradox. LGBT Burkinabés are punished twice. First, by their own government's laws. Second, by the collapse of foreign support caused by those laws. Imagine being told, you're illegal here, and by the way, the clinic that gives you life-saving medicine is shutting down because of politics. It's not just injustice, it's deliberate suffocation. But here's where it gets more cynical. Some African leaders actually use aid threats to their advantage. When Western nations or donors criticize anti-LGBT laws, leaders spin it into a sovereignty battle. See, the West wants to control us. They're bribing us with aid to accept their values. But we are proud Africans. We reject their money. The crowd cheers, the leader looks like a hero, and the suffering of LGBT citizens ignored. It's a high-stakes chess game where aid becomes a bargaining chip, not a lifeline, and LGBT lives are the pawns sacrificed first. Meanwhile, local governments rarely replace the funding lost. Why would they? Anti-LGBT laws are about clout, not compassion. So the services vanish. HIV prevention programs decline. Shelters shut down. Community events are banned. The result is a morality budget that costs lives, but earns politicians applause. It's the political version of burning your house down to prove you hate termites. Sure, the termites are gone, but so is your roof. At the end of the day, it's not elites who suffer. They still access private hospitals, secure homes, and international networks. It's ordinary LGBT Africans, poor, rural, vulnerable, who pay with their health, safety, and futures. So when leaders say they're standing strong against the West, what they really mean is we're standing on the backs of our own citizens. And it's not just Burkina Faso. This story stretches across the continent, painting Africa's map in two colors: nations criminalizing and nations resisting. Let's zoom out and see where everyone stands. That's fact 9. So, where does Africa actually stand on LGBT rights? Well, if you picture the continent as a giant map, it's not a rainbow. It's a patchwork quilt of extremes. Some countries are cautiously progressive, others are aggressively hostile, and the majority, let's just say don't ask, don't tell, has mutated into don't ask and definitely go to jail if you tell. Here's the cold stat. Over half of Africa's 54 countries criminalize same-sex relationships in some form. That's more than 30 nations where intimacy can get you arrested. And the punishments aren't symbolic. They range from years in prison to, in some cases, death sentences under Sharia law. Uganda takes the spotlight with its infamous 2023 Anti-Homosexuality Act, which even criminalized the promotion of LGBT rights. Nigeria enforces harsh penalties too, especially in the northern states under Sharia. Ghana has bills in the works, and now Burkina Faso joins the club. It's a hostile majority, and the dominoes keep falling. But then you've got the rebels of the map. South Africa legalized same-sex marriage in 2006, making it the first and only African country to do so. It's not perfect. Hate crimes still happen, but legally it's miles ahead of the continent. Other small bright spots? Cape Verde and Mozambique, where same-sex activity is decriminalized, and some protections exist. Botswana, too. Its court struck down colonial-era sodomy laws in 2019, a landmark win for activists. These outliers prove that progress is possible, but they're isolated islands in a rising sea of criminalization. What this creates is a split personality. On one side, nations pushing harsher laws, parliaments shouting about morality, and citizens cheering the crackdown. On the other, a handful of countries cautiously moving toward tolerance, backed mostly by youth movements and activist networks. The divide is stark. Imagine a rainbow flag stretched across the continent. In most places, it's shredded, but in a few corners, it's waving defiantly. This inequality isn't just a local issue. It affects migration, asylum, and even diplomacy. LGBT Africans fleeing hostile nations often end up seeking refuge in South Africa or Europe. Meanwhile, hostile laws create tension with Western donors who tie aid to human rights. It's a geopolitical fault line, and Burkina Faso's new law just widened the crack. But here's the key. This map is not static, it's moving. Laws are changing, activists are fighting, and public opinion, especially among the youth, is shifting. The future of LGBT rights in Africa isn't carved in stone. It's drawn in chalk, constantly redrawn depending on who holds the eraser. And that brings us to the big finish, the future. Because if this map is still being drawn, the question isn't just where Africa stands now, it's where Africa is heading. That's fact 10. So where does all this leave Africa's LGBT movement? If you're expecting a neat ending tied up with a bow, forget it. This fight is far from over, and the battlefield is shifting faster than ever. The laws may look like a dead end, but history has a funny way of surprising us. Let's be blunt. In the short term, things are going to get harder. With Burkina Faso, Mali, and Uganda pushing harsher laws, politicians across Africa have smelled the blood in the water. Why fight to fix the economy when you can score easy points banning LGBT rights? It's populism 101. So yes, more crackdowns are likely. More parliaments flexing their moral muscles. More leaders choosing scapegoats over solutions. For activists, that means darker days ahead. But here's the twist. Africa is the youngest continent on Earth. Over 60% of Africans are under 25, and that youth demographic is plugged in, online, and far less likely to buy into dusty colonial-era laws dressed up as tradition. Scroll through TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram in cities like Lagos, Nairobi, or Johannesburg, and you'll see young Africans openly mocking politicians' anti-LGBT posturing. They know clout chasing when they see it. They can smell hypocrisy from a mile away. That's the future politicians can't legislate away. A generation raised on memes, global conversations, and a taste for freedom. And activism is evolving too. Where rallies are banned, WhatsApp groups organize underground networks. Where protests are shut down, hashtags trend globally. One viral video can do what years of pamphlets couldn't: spark solidarity across borders. That's why governments fear social media as much as they fear LGBT visibility, because once an idea goes viral, you can't arrest it. There's also the growing solidarity between Africa and other parts of the global South. Activists in Latin America and Asia have faced similar struggles and won. Those connections matter. They prove to African activists that change is possible and that they're not alone in this fight. So what's the outlook? The future of LGBT rights in Africa is a tug of war. On one side, conservative leaders doubling down on bans for clout. On the other, youth, activists, and global allies pulling toward equality. The rope may be burning right now, but history shows us something important. Oppression doesn't last forever. Colonial laws eventually cracked. Apartheid eventually fell. Dictatorships eventually toppled. This fight, it's just the next chapter. So here's the takeaway. Burkina Faso's law isn't the end of the story. It's fuel. It's the spark that will push new voices, new movements, and new strategies. And the leaders who think they've silenced LGBT Africans, they may have just awakened a generation that refuses to stay quiet. And that's where we'll leave it. A continent caught between past ghosts and future battles. The question now is, which side of history will Africa write? If you want the answer and the raw, unfiltered analysis you won't get on mainstream news, hit subscribe to Global Pulse News. Smash that like button, ring the bell, and drop your thoughts below. Are these bans about morality or just political theater for clout? Because one thing's for sure, this story is far from over.